Hello everyone, Don here with a post-flight follow-up review of my War Corsair. I'm happy to see that we got a lot of people watching the video, and appreciate that, and want to send out my thanks to everybody that gave me congratulations on that. Really appreciate it, and thanks for watching. And it's really nice to see, and I'm really surprised at how many people around the world are watching this thing. People referencing the countries they're from, and I mean Australia and everywhere, Thailand, and lots of places keep popping up. But anyway, I want to say thanks for all the congratulations, and it was nice to see. I went down through the comments last night, and there was, oh my goodness, probably over 300 comments there, and I was like, well, I can't answer them all. So, but when I read them all, and I go through, and I always put a check mark. I gave a like, thumbs up to all of them. That lets you know that at least I liked it, or I see a lot of them had a lot of thumbs up, and I don't think you can tell which ones are mine. But I always read your comments and give a thumbs up, like, unless you're one of those a-holes that want to troll you. So. Again, thanks for all the congratulations, well appreciated. And then this morning I get up and there's like 650 comments. I was like, oh my goodness. It took me an hour to go through them. I did make a post and comment and pinned it so people could see, but there's no way I can get through there and answer too many questions. I mean, it took me over an hour just to read them and give you a thumbs up. And I did put some likes up. I did check off every one of them with a thumbs up to show that I did read your comment, and some of them I gave little hearts for what they had to say and such, and especially if you were from another country and you put down the country you were from, I gave you hearts on that just so I acknowledge that you're from another country. So for all the new people that aren't familiar with this particular channel or this project, I just want to give everybody a basic overview of what it is I have here. A lot of you may not know, because by the questions I can tell that people haven't seen any of my previous videos to understand what this is. Okay, for starters, this is called a War Corsair. And WAR is an acronym for War Aircraft Replicas. That's the company that originally designed these airplanes back in the 70s. As a kid, when I was in elementary school going into junior high, there was a TV program that came on in 1976 called Baba Black Sheep. It was the exploits of a squadron known VMF 214 as the Black Sheep Squadron, and it was commanded at one time by a guy named Major Gregory Pappy Boynton. Pappy was his nickname because he was like 30 years old. He was old compared to all the kids straight out of college that were 22, 24 years old flying these things. So before that, Bubba Black Sheep, I was like 13 years old when that came out in 12 when it came out the first year, be 76. I was 12 years old. I had never even seen a Corsair, never even heard of one, and I was always a big airplane buff, but the only planes I ever seen were in books in the library at the school and such. So that was the first time I ever had a chance to see a Corsair. So after watching Bubba Black Sheep, I just absolutely fell in love with the airplane. Robert Conrad played Greg Boynton, Pappy. So that's my introduction to the Corsair. And then a few years later, when I was in high school, around junior high, senior, there was a Popular Mechanics book my friend always got, and they had a story in there on replica warplanes at the time, and they were showing pictures and mentioned these war aircraft replicas. Now, the Corsair is not the only model that they make. The Corsair was the second aircraft they designed. The first plane they ever designed was a Focke-Wulf 190, German Focke-Wulf, and it used a Volkswagen Beetle engine that was like 80 horsepower. It was a big bore and stroker, but it was still underpowered with 80 horse. But that was the first model they made and designed. Again, these are only plans built. They're made from wood, foam, and fiberglass, and metal parts for the gear and all such. But they don't. Back then they used to sell prefab components. You could buy motor mounts, you could buy the landing gear stuff and all the metal brackets for hinges and aileron controls and the likes. But they sold a lot of prefab cowlings. Fuel tanks were originally fiberglass cowlings. They used to make molds and sell all that stuff. The canopy you could buy through them. You could buy the tail wheel assembly and a lot of prefab parts that helped with building if you didn't want to make everything yourself. This airplane, everything you see on this, I made myself. So let me go over what I got here. This is actually meant to have a Continental 0200 Continental, which is 100 horsepower. And this is a Subaru Legacy out of a 1990 Subaru. It's a 2200cc 2.2 liter. It's a single overhead cam, but it's got 4 valves per cylinder, 2 intake, 2 exhaust. In the car, it's rated at like 135 horsepower with the accessories and everything on it. The only thing I've done to this motor is I fabbed up my own exhaust out of stainless, and I cut the manifold down. It was a big casting. It sat really high, like up here. So I cut it all down and bought some tubes, cut it off here, and I welded this all up. It's aluminum. These tubes are all the same length. They go inside and they're welded, so they're exactly the same length. So that's the only modification. And I think it was turned around that way because this is the front of the motor. This is the transmission end of the motor, which would have been in the back of the car. And then what I got here is a Ross Aero reduction unit. It was made in Arizona. The company's no longer in business, but it's a 2.17 ratio. So when the engine's spinning 6,000 RPM, the propeller's running about 2,600. So, and the engine is set up to give me maximum RPM. As you've seen in the video, I mentioned that it's about just a hair under 6,000 RPM on climb out at 100 mile an hour. It is water cooled. Radiators are in the wing. So, but these models I mentioned, they make the third airplane they designed was a Japanese Zero. And then I think the next one was probably a Hawker Sea Fury, which was a British plane, British fighter. And then they came out with the P-51 Mustang was the last one they came out with. There was only one of those ever built. That was in Kit Plane magazine in the late 80s or 90s. They had a guy developing a 4-cylinder inline engine from a Honda. Because of the narrow cowling, you couldn't put the 0200 in there without having blisters on the sides of the cowl that would throw it off. So the guy went through months and months of design and building this engine, put it in a plane, and the president of war at the time was out flying and showing off with it, and he was doing a high-speed pass over the runway with that airplane. It flew great, beautiful, and he ran into some aileron flutter, and the push rods go up in, they hook into a bell crank, and the bell crank was mounted on the, back in the day they were using aluminum, bent aluminum brackets. The aluminum broke, lost control of the aileron, rolled plane over into the runway and killed him. So that was the only P-51 Mustang I've ever seen flying, or ever heard about flying. So there was only one built, but they do sell the planes for them. And then there was a guy in Australia took the plans and modified them and made a P-40 Warhawk out of them. So you can get P-40 Warhawk plans as well. And then they had plans for doing like a Junkers JU Stuka dive bomber and a Messerschmitt. And the current owner of the war has been drawing up drawings for a Messerschmitt 109. So basically, that's what the airplane is. And then they had one commenter asking what I was going to name the airplane. Apparently, the person had not watched any of my previous videos, but I did reply. It's on the side of the plane. It's named Susie Bell, after my wife, Suzanne. So, and the 86 is Pappy Boynton's photo op. When he got to 20 victories, they did a photo op and a story to send back to the States. So the photo op was in this airplane, which is the Buno number. It's like a serial number from the factory is 18086. And if you look at my tail number, that's my tail number, 18086. So this airplane is painted up like it was when Boynton had his photo shoot. He never flew the plane, and it was called Lucy Bell, L-U-C-Y Bell. Lucy was his girlfriend during the war. He was married and divorced, and he had a couple children from his marriage, but they ended up divorcing because he was off fighting the war, and he run into this Lucy, and then she ended up taking his money from him, like 10 grand out of his account, and took off. So he had a bad taste in his mouth. And after the war, when they did the photo shoot, the actual Lucy was hidden. You couldn't see it because there was a guy standing on the wing, and people asked him, you know, what was the name on the plane, and he said it was Lulu Bell. So if you see any plastic model, Revel plastic model airplanes where people do these Corsairs, it says, everyone put Lulu Bell because that's what he said it was. And Lulu Bell was a cartoon cat character. It was a tuxedo, black and white cat back in the day. But the real one was actually Lucy Bell. But the Marine Corps never had their own airplanes. They always pulled from a pool. So that's just a little history on the plane. And then they painted his name on here, Major Gregory Boyington. Because the Marine Corps, you didn't have your personal plane, you just flew airplanes out of a pool of planes along with other squadrons, so the squadron shared planes. There was two of them in particular that he flew the most. One was 883, and there was another one that he flew. I can't remember it offhand. So anyway, that's kind of the history of the plane. Everybody on here, I forgot to mention that my handle, Dino Don 64. My name, of course, is Don, but my full name is just Don Gable, Donald Gable. So if you're wondering, that's my full name. This airplane is currently being hangared out here at Meadville Airport, which is about 45 minutes south of where I live. I live up by Lake Erie, which is due that way, due north. It's Lake Erie. You're talking, it's just within my 25 nautical miles, so I could literally fly from here, go up around my house and come back, and I'll be within my 25 nautical mile playground for this airplane for the next 40 hours. So I got 39.3 hours to go before I can fly this thing outside of that 25 nautical mile radius. So again, this airplane was all built from scratch. Landing gear, everything is all built from scratch. So what I did now is I came down here on my flight. Let me just go over what happened on my flight. I talked a little bit about it. Flying, climbing out, everything was running fine, doing fine. The water temperature, I kept an eye on that, and that's the biggest thing that concerned me was the water temp. So once I took off to the east and got out and around, was coming down, I kept an eye on my water temps, and they were reaching 210, wanting to go a little high, but it finally quit before it got to 220. It would get up to about 215 or so, and it would kind of stay there. And so I was playing with power and keeping a close eye on it because I was concerned about that. That was always going to be the major concern, is how it was going to cool when it was in the flight. Running up and down the runway, it would get up to about the same temperature, but it never got hot, never overheated, never puked out any water. And the header tank is here, so if this gets hot and overflows, it'll spit it out here, and it'll run out the bottom of the cowling and let me know that it got hot, and plus I got the gauge in the airplane. But other than that, it did manage to do. So I got in, I hurry up and did a stall. The first stall you seen was when I was heading west into the sunset. That was an evening flight, so it's not a morning flight. That was the sunset to the west. So I did my first stall with the flaps up. The whole flight was conducted with the gear down. That's just one less thing to worry about. If I tried to put the gear up, if there was an issue putting the gear up, and if it was managed to get stuck or something, and then the biggest problem would be if I come back in and forget to put it down. So all testing in the first few flights are going to be with the gear down. I'm not going to touch it until I get a little more familiar with the plane. So that takes care of the first stall. And then I think I did one more pattern around the airport, and then a second time around I think is when I did my stalls with the flaps. I put flaps down about 10 degrees and slowed her down. Then I put another 10 degrees in and slowed her down, but that's where it stopped. It didn't want to go any farther than 10 degrees. You can see I got some marks here. This is 10, 20, 30. Excuse me, it didn't want to drop below 20. When I'm holding the button down, it didn't want to go. See, I've got some play in it right now, which it always has a little bit. But pulling on this, there's no way I can pull on it to get it all the way up to here. So I think what's happening is my linear actuator that's deploying the flaps, it was supposed to be good for like 220 pounds of lifting. It could lift 220 pounds, lift or push 220 or somewhere in that neighborhood. Well, apparently it's not enough. I think the motor was stalling out, and it wouldn't allow the flaps to come past 20 degrees. So I come down here to check them and see what's going on. And then the second issue, which I've always expected, my intent was always to put some kind of aluminum on the inside, underside of here, so when the flaps splay out, the aluminum sheet will be attached to one, will come across this one, so when they come down, this will be closed. So I've got an air gap there of leaking, especially between these ones. So I think the poor performance of the flaps is a lot of it has to do with these air gaps. But I've always intended on doing something either like attaching an aluminum sheet to this and cutting a slot inside one way or the other and let it fold in and out. but I think it'll work just fine having it attached to the bottom and have it the right width. It'll be a tapered piece. It'll be attached on somehow to this is plywood out here, and then I can have it lay against this outside and maybe put a strap over it to kind of hold it, because the wind's going to hold it tight against whichever way I go, but I intend on closing these gaps. And then today down here, stopped recording on me. Every now and then it does that, I don't know why. But down here you can see this is one of the bell cranks for the flaps, and if I pull on it, it's loose. It is keyed, it has a keyway. It's only 8mm shaft through here. It goes through the spar. It goes through the spar and comes out the backside and hooks up to the linkage to the linear actuator. But there's one little tiny set screw in the top, and that's right where the keyway is. So apparently it's loosened up a little bit, and it's playing. It's got some play in it. I'm sorry, folks, but this is kind of tough to get this to do what I want it to do. But come on, sorry again. But let me see if you can see what it's doing here. Let's see, the shaft's not moving, hardly moving. So it's slightly loose. So before I leave today, I'm going to pull these out. Just got to pull this bolt out and loosen that set screw, and it'll just slide right off. These aluminum pieces you see here are they actually have a ball bearing in it. There's one on the front side and one on the back side. But they're, like I said, 8mm ball bearings in the shaft, a keywayed shaft. So I'll pull them off, and at the very least I'll drill maybe 2 more holes. I'll drill all the way through from side to side and add a third set, 2 more set screws, give me 3 set screws. And again, for anybody that's may have never seen, people talk about, well, maybe put a camera on the belly so you can put a monitor or something in here to see it while you're taxiing, because you can't see over the nose of this plane, you know. But there's no room in here for anything like that. It'll be just a chore to do my GPS. I might be able to clamp it up here somewhere, and it's, you know, there's no room here for anything. So that's kind of a condition there. But the only 2 troubles I had were the temperature and the flaps. I wasn't pleased with the actual performance with the flaps, but they did work as far as helping slow the plane down, because on the landing I did not expect the landing to be that fast. My friend that flies these down in Alabama has a War P-47. He says they really, when you wheel land them, they go a long ways. They're hard to slow down, and it uses a lot of runway to stop. So that's kind of what I was expecting. But because I had the flaps on there, when I did that landing, as soon as I hit the ground, I mean, it was just brakes on. It just slowed right down and didn't want to roll at all. Tail come down nice. So it was a good landing. I mean, it wasn't great, but it was the very first full landing of this plane, so I had no idea what to expect. I did come in, people comment, yeah, that approach was awful low, and this is nothing but woods out here, so everywhere around me is wooded, and but it was a long approach. I was maintaining power, and I was playing with the power on approach to keep it from getting too low. And I've always, every time I've ever flown, no matter what I fly, I always end up putting them on the numbers. They always tell you shoot for the end of the runway, and then you kind of drag it out and land down the runway. But me, I was like, that's my landing spot, 99 times out of 10. But the next time, I'll know what to expect, and I'll land longer, because I don't need to land at the very end of the runway like that, and after knowing that this thing does slow down super fast. So I'll make adjustments to that. But again, that was the very first landing, and I thought it was a very good landing. It wasn't perfect, but I'll get to the point where you won't even know the wheels will touch ground once I get used to this thing. So what I did today, I wanted to come down and address this heating problem, and my cowling, the radiators are in the wings, and the air comes out the bottom of the wing. Well, I had it fiberglassed in there with a little door, a little like cowl flap. Well, I went in and I come down here and I cut them out. This was the cowl flap. When you look at the front of the wing, you'd see this, and then it was all done on the sides. But let me show you what I did, because I did some research again. I knew the radiators work on a differential pressure, meaning when the air's coming in here, you want a higher pressure when the air hits here, because the air has to pass through the fins, and the fins cause a restriction, so it makes pressure. You get more pressure here, and you want a lower pressure on the backside. And the lower pressure acts like a vacuum to help pull the air through. And the problem I had was my opening on this thing was tiny. The opening was like that big. The flap came down, about 1.5 inches at best. So now I came in and I cut them off. They were from here to here. So this was like the original opening right here, this way. But here it was smaller, so it was a very narrow opening. So I just come in and I cut across the sides of it and cut it out here. There's still another 1/2 inch of space, but I wanted to leave some meat here. So I've got this big opening now. And then later on, if this works out fine, I can still make another little fake cow flap that'll come out here and hang down and close off the sides, and the airflow across here may help create a suction vacuum. It was probably doing that before, but it just wasn't big enough to get that differential pressure, the delta, across this thing. You want to see pressure here, lower pressure here. If the pressure is the same on each side, air won't flow through the radiator and it won't work. It'd be like taking that radiator and doing this with it. You have pressure equal on both sides, no air will pass through it. You always need a positive pressure with a lightly lower pressure here to work. So with the airflow across here, it's far enough back that it should help pull the air down through. When you're flying, you actually have pressure here pushing up on the plane, whereas the top of the wing creates a low pressure and it lifts. That's how the plane flies. So if this was too far back, it would try to push pressure back up through here, and it may not flow at all. You could get like a digital manometer, put one pitot tube in here, one pitot tube in the front, and read the delta to see what the difference is on the pressures. But you want a lower pressure here, otherwise the air can't flow through it. So I think, and this is the spar, this is the actual spar of the plane, so I can't go any farther back than that. And the radiator is in there at an angle, as you can see. It's just at an angle. So I got them both done. I'll have to get some epoxy, come down here and retreat some of this light exposed foam area. But this is a brake line, hard brake line going out to the brakes for the wheels. So we'll see what this does. So that was my main concern. So let me get back up. And then while I was down there cutting that out, I just happened to notice on the cowling there was a little bit of a burn there on that side. The muffler was sitting there touching. I can see just a tiny bit of blister. I've got this material on there. This is a ceramic blanket that's used in fireplaces. It's like over 2,000 degrees temp, and it's doing its job, except for the pipe was coming out. So I pushed on the pipe, and I see this. The muffler this is a floating muffler, and that's what happened. It was normally up here, and it dropped a little bit. And the only thing that keeps this up here is a pin that I designed on this side. There's like a bolt welded to this tube, and then this little piece sticking out is the muffler. These mufflers, these exhaust manifolds go clear back into here each side. And it has wobbled out a little bit because this is loose all the time. So in order to fix that, I'm going to get an Adel clamp attached to here, and I'll either use a strip of stainless, like this stainless. I'll make a strip and a band clamp to come around here, clamp it here, and then pull it up and clamp it there, and I'll make it, and that'll hold her up there. Or I could use a short piece of cable, but whatever I put around here is going to be like a clamp and bolted, a wide strap, maybe 1/2 inch wide, and that'll help hold it there. But this muffler is kept loose because this is all stainless steel, and this thing will, when it gets hot, they expand and contract. So if you had this as a solid connection, this exhaust system is going to put a lot of load on that muffler. So that muffler is a little free floater, so these pipes can expand and contract on their own. So I got to tie that up before my next flight. So that's the one thing I found. So that's why I pulled the cowling off, and that's why you see it this way. So I checked the oil, checked the coolant level, everything looks fine. So I'll see if there's any other comments a lot of people are asking about. A lot of them were asking, was the gear retracted? No, I left the gear down, and I mentioned why. just so I wouldn't forget to put it down when I got up. One person thought that these were possibly fuel doors or fuel covers, but that's not the case. It's just a rubber silicone. Part of the landing gear retract pokes up through here about an inch, and that's kind of your verification that the gear's up. That's all drawn into plans that way because the wing's not thick enough to retract all the gear linkage all the way in, so but that's like an indicator. So flying, that just goes to show that the air moving over across to this is creating a vacuum and picking up, so that was kind of a little bubble shaped flying. Let's see, people ask about speeds. It was, like I said, I was climbing out consistently at about 100 miles an hour, and I never went over 120. I was most of the time between 110 and 120 on the flying because of the gear being down. Once the gear is retracted, it'll come up. It'll cruise a little faster. I'm expecting 140, 150 cruise, and hopefully that'll happen at that 4,500 RPM, which is peak torque for this motor. Peak horsepower is 135 or so at 5,800, and peak torque's 130 at 4,400 RPM. So that's almost exactly 75% power setting. So when you throttle back to 4,500, I was doing like 110 to 120 with that big old wheel hanging out there dragging. So the battery's up here for help compensate for weight and balance. Weight and balance is right on the numbers. The fuel tank is all aluminum and it holds 13.5 gallons of fuel. So what I need to do is get that clamped up before the next flight. The flaps, I can tinker with those, but I got to get the linkage squared away so it's not loose. I can fly them this way, but I'm going to take some pictures of these underside and figure out which flap I want to attach the aluminum to so it overlaps the other one, because this one's straight, has a this one's completely straight, this one's curved, this one's straight to about here, and then it curves a little bit right there. So I need to put the aluminum on one of them to where it's gonna, this one here is probably gonna have to be a little bit curved, but the idea is it'll be a triangle shaped piece that'll be attached to one, and it'll just lay up against the backside here because the air will push it against here, and that'll close up this gap. So see, even this side's got that play in it that I need to try and tighten up and get out. It was tiring yet, but all that 15 hours of running up and down the runway that everybody wasn't happy with had done its limit on that linkage in there. So I'll square that away. I'll try 3 set screws per, Loctite them, and we'll go from there. And if it's still not enough, I did find me another linear actuator that's like $50 on eBay, and it says it's 1,320 pounds of force, where this one was just a small motor. The other one's got a substantial size motor on it, and it will handle 1,320 pounds, where this one's only 220 pounds. So if it was stalling out and not letting me go, that bigger one will definitely do the job. But getting to it is the fun part. It's behind the seat, and you got to work back there just by feel because you can't see nothing. But it's just bolted into the spar and such. I can get it out of there, and then I'll have to take it home, get the new one, and do whatever I need. But it's still a 12-volt system. It should work fine. And then the only other thing I do want to do is my flap switch. It's a 3-position switch. It's a center switch. Neutral is center position is what you see here. It's momentary down for flaps down, center off. Momentary up for up flaps. And what I want to do is get one that's center off, just like this, but click up. So it'll stay up for the flaps come up, and I want momentary down, so you can put the flaps a little bit, a little more, till it's down. But if you're doing a go-around or touch and go, you don't want to be sitting here holding this thing and pulling the flaps while you're trying to go full throttle up here. I'd just be able to flip it, and it'll just raise the flaps, because there's no need to raise the flaps a little at a time. You just hit it, flip it up, and the flaps come up, and there's limit switches in the linear actuator to stop that. So down, so I want to get the new position, so it clicks up for up, center off, momentary, just like these for down. And then when you have to do a go around, you just hit it up and it'll stay up and it'll bring the flaps up, and you can keep your hand on the throttle the whole time. So that's just a simple change out. Just pull the panel down, take the nut off, and unscrew it and screw it back in. It's a quick change. So I got to find that, because I know they do make them. They make these switches in all kinds of configurations. So change that, adjust those. The cooling, I hope, is taken care of. Fix that muffler, and we should be able to go back at it. So, and people were asking, do I intend to keep doing videos? And yes, I will keep posting videos. Right now I have the camera mount back there that you saw. I can mount it on the pitot tube. There's nothing underneath the plane to mount the camera to, but I do want to mount the camera. I can probably mount it on the leaf spring back there on the tail. I want to see these gear doors, and I want to get these. The camera quit again. I don't know why. I want to see what the gear doors are doing in flight. So my first flight, I'll probably, first time I go to retract the gear, I'll probably just pull the doors, pull the actuator rods out of the way so they won't jam up on anything in there. And I'll do the gear retract for the first time without the doors on there, just to be safe. But I would like to have the camera on there to at least see what they're doing, to where if I can put them back on. They may not work this way, because, like I say, they are kind of a loose fit because the way this linkage is under here. So I don't know what they're doing in flight. But I may have to go to linear actuators to close the doors. Once the gear goes up, it'll hit a switch. The linear actuator will pull each door shut. One linear actuator to pull them both shut. But right now they're mechanically linked to the gear when it goes up, and only the last, a couple inches of travel of the wheel do they start pulling close. So it's a very, very complex, tight system in there. And if you try to put springs to hold them open, it just puts resistance on the gear cycling up, and then the gear don't want to go all the way up. I mean, if you watch my earlier videos, it's a nightmare. That's why you've never seen any of the Corsairs ever with these doors on them for these replicas. See if there's anything else. Questions? I mean, there's no way I can get in there. I'd like to answer more questions on the comments, but I get back home tonight, there'll probably be 1,000 comments, and it's tough to go in and find these comments because they don't come back in at the very top of the post. And you can select newest ones first, but if you're commenting on somebody else's comment, then they don't pop to the top. And you got to go look through, and you got to go look at where people have made multiple comments, and you got to open it up and look and see if a comment's in there. YouTube doesn't send you every comment either, because you get 1,000 of them in your email. So the tail wheel's working like a jewel. As you've seen, that takeoff was great. I stayed off to the left of the center line because I've never run this thing to 6,000 RPM yet down here running. So that was my first time at full throttle, 6,000, and this is a counter-rotating prop, which means it torque steers to the right, and you have to use left rudder to maintain center line, whereas a fixed regular aircraft like that Piper out there, those have clockwise rotating props, which causes a left turning tendency. Mine's backwards, it's a right turning, so I have to use left rudder. The other planes use right rudder, but all my aircraft, gyros and everything, were all counterclockwise, and I had to use left rudder all the time, so it's not a big deal. But because I'm going from 4,000 to 6,000 RPM, I didn't know what to expect for torque steer, so I stayed left of center line. But once I hit that full throttle, I just went up to like 4,000 till the tail started coming up, and then once it was up, I started, and I just slowly kept pushing the throttle to get to full throttle. And the more power I got on there, the straighter it seemed to want to track, and I just held the rudder steady, and it stayed left of the center line the whole way. And then once I looked down and seen I was already going just past 80, a little back pressure on the stick, and it came right off the ground, and it stayed there. So that's why I was left of center, if people were curious. I was expecting a little more torque steer out of it, but it actually tracked a lot truer than before. So doing those runs down the runway helped me feel that all out, and it did what I wanted to do. So, but it was a very, people were asking, how were you? I bet you were nervous and sweaty hands, and it was like, no, I was more nervous thinking about it while I was driving down here than I was in the plane. Once I got in the plane, and I always said that when this thing, by the time I get done running this thing through its paces before I ever get it in the air, once it gets in the air, it's going to be like a non-event. It's going to be like, well, what was the big deal? it's just going to feel normal. It's a club plane. You can see it. Actually, I can't even see this viewfinder. There he is. Zoom right in on that boy. But anyway, I wasn't nervous at all. Not one time. I was just a little concerned with the temperatures, but finally it looked like it wasn't going to overheat, so that eased my mind. But I was watching it the whole time, adjusting power to see if I could make it better. So that was the only concern. I wasn't scared. That I was just staying close to the airport. I was over 3,000 feet. Could have been higher, but I didn't want to keep holding it at full throttle with the temperature where it was. So that's the reason why I didn't go any higher. I felt I was high enough. The stalls on this, if you notice, the left wing would always dip a little bit. And I believe that the problem from that was I never pulled the engine all the way back to idle when I was doing the stalls. I just pulled it back. I pulled it back to like half throttle, let it slow down. I eased her back more, but I was probably over 2,000 RPM. The engine was still turning, still had torque. So every time the stall broke, the left wing dipped a little bit, and I think that was only because I wasn't at idle. So the engine was still producing some thrust at the point and some torque, so it just nudged the wing down, but it was very subtle. Just dipped the wing, dipped the nose a little bit, and I gave her power, and it was flying. It was very, very smooth. But all three stalls I did, the left wing did dip a little, but I'm pretty sure it was because of that. So. All right, well, I'm going to see my friend showing up here. This is Fred. He was in the video at the hangar when I taxied around. So I think I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here. I'm not sure how long this video is, and I'll have to clip it together. But again, thank you, everybody, for your congratulations. Really appreciate that, and I'm glad to see you guys enjoyed that. And stay tuned. I will have more. I'm going to try and go out this weekend. I think the weather's going to hold out yet. It's going to be still a nice week. They're calling for a chance of rain next day or so, but I think the temps are going to hold out. So, all right, for now, I'm going to end her here, folks, and appreciate all the comments, questions, concerns, and hope you guys enjoy, and I will catch you on the next one. So for now, this is Dino Don out.